Really appreciate the opportunity to share these very exciting research findings with the group. I'm Fred Gaudy, a Senior Account Director at Zeldis Research, and today I'll be sharing with you some findings from our recent thought leadership project titled Retirement Redefined, the Risks, Rewards, and Realities of Modern Retirement. Just some background. We at Zeldis are a market research company. We have several specialties, including financial services, group benefits, healthcare, and health insurance. And we thought about this when we think about conducting thought leadership research on behalf of the greater research community. We realized there was an opportunity for us to sort of leverage what we know from the custom projects we conduct in our industry knowledge into something a little bit more high level and conceptual, sort of a 360-degree view of modern retirement from the viewpoint of those who are living it right now. So a little bit about the study. The goal, of course, is to understand the risks, rewards, and realities of modern retirement. One thing that I think differentiates this project is that we sampled retirees aged 55 and older, so we're allowing some younger, early retirees into the research as well. So it's 1,000 completed interviews, thanks to our partners at Dynata for allowing us to use their online panel for this research. And this research was conducted back in May, so it was fielded between May 5 and May 19 of this year. Some definitions you can see on the right. Most of them are sort of obvious, but I'll spend a second on them because these icons do appear throughout the report. Early retirees, we call them age-ins. They're those who are 55 to 64. Retirement savings will have some differences by that group, as well as by the time in which people start saving. So we call early savers those who saved for retirement before age 30. Average savers are those who began saving at some point in the early to mid-30s, and late savers started saving for retirement after age 35. We'll also have some call-outs throughout the report with respect to those who work or do not work with a financial advisor. That's not an icon, but they do appear with some regularity, so I'll mention that here at the outset. A little bit about the respondents. Again, you had to be retired from your primary full-time employer to qualify for this research. The mean age was 71. Almost everyone was both retired and not working. 3% are working part-time, and we have some interesting findings on those individuals I'll share in just a bit. 85% Caucasian, 60% married. You can look at gender. We forced an equal split, male versus female, 50-50. About 7 in 10 at the time they retired had household income under $100,000, and 60% lived in a suburban setting. Relatively educated sample with 55% holding at least a bachelor's degree. The data, we did not weight. There are other studies on a 65-plus Gen Pop population that do weight. Our decision not to weight was intentional, thinking that we already are selecting based on some variables that, obviously the retirement status and other things, that it didn't make sense really to weight the data. It's more just a snapshot of this audience and this representation of those who are already retired. The report will consist of several sections. This presentation, I know we have an audience of insurance and financial services researchers here for the most part, so we'll primarily focus our findings on the retirement results, and we'll spend some more time on the other results later in the presentation. Prior to conducting the online survey, we conducted some exploratory qualitative research, and we have some representative quotes from that qual that we sort of interspersed throughout the report. This quote was interesting. "All I want in retirement is to be comfortable with my finances and my health and not have any surprises." This quote really sort of speaks to the tone of the results that we'll be talking through throughout this presentation. The first question that we'll talk through and the first set of results we'll talk through relate to something pretty high level, specifically the meaning of retirement. You can see that there are we provide them a long list of possible meanings of retirement. They were able to select up to 3, and you can see that for the most part, the top cited responses are positive. You can see retirees talking about retirement as a time of leisure, an opportunity to spend more time with family, having fewer obligations and more time to pursue their interests and hobbies. And the quotes on the right really relate to that, it being a second act, living a quiet, content life, doing whatever they want to do, whenever or wherever they want to do it. But I also think it's interesting, and an interesting takeaway on this slide, that at the very bottom, We're not asking about concerns. We're not asking for challenges. We will later. I'll have a slide on that. But even here, 17% talk about increased concern and attention to their health. So clearly the meaning of retirement, while mostly positive, also contains some anxiety in the minds of those who've already retired. Retirement by the numbers, the average successful retiree in this survey, again, everyone who took this survey retired already, started saving for retirement at age 32 and a half. Their ideal retirement age when they were 25, they think was 61 and a half. And on average, they retired from their last full-time job at age 61. So certainly some synchrony here in terms of their expectations versus reality. But then look on the right-hand side of the slide. You can see that 51% of retirees retired earlier than expected, and 33% of retirees retired later than expected. Now, if I were to do some back-of-the-envelope math here, you would see that fewer than 20% of retirees retired at the time they expected. It's interesting because we have some data later in the report that say 76% of retirees say the age that they retired was up to then. But put it in context with this, and you can see that clearly expectations and reality don't always match up with respect to retirement age. This is consistent with what we see with research that's published by several of our clients who do retirement readiness research for public release, several organizations in the public interest that do research with retirees for public release. It's clear that for the most part, retirement is a tough thing to time for people, especially when they're early to middle in their careers. 44% of the retirees in our research work with a financial advisor. In terms of their working style, about half of those who work with an FA delegate pretty much all of the investment decisions to their FA. 46% have it be a collaborative process, so they work sort of interchangeably with their FA to make decisions. Only 6% feel confident enough to tell their advisor what to do with respect to investment decisions. Those more likely to work with a financial advisor include Caucasians, those who are married, those who have more significant amounts of retirement savings, college graduates, and those in the Midwest and in the suburbs. With respect to retirement products currently owned, 89%, not surprisingly, have some sort of just base level savings, complemented by 3 and 4, 75% having some sort of retirement account. 64% diversify even further with other investment accounts, and 55% have some form of individual insurance, whether that be permanent life, term life, or some sort of LTC policy. The takeaway from the top is that for those who successfully retired, Social Security is not enough. They often have other things on top of it, and the average retiree in this study has 2 or 3 things on top of that. So those who successfully retired are those who have sort of self-selected in a sense to have a sort of diverse array of tools in their toolbox with respect to retirement products. Those who have the most diversity, I would say, in their retirement savings portfolio are those who work with an FA, those early savers, those with substantial savings, 250K or more, and men. So those are the 4 groups that sort of represent a population difference among retirees. The data I'm showing here is top 3 box data, so it's on an agreement scale. And these are the 8s, 9s, and 10s on a 10-point scale. And these are feelings about retirement. So some mostly positive findings here in terms of these attitudes. 92% agree that it's important to keep the mind and body active. 87% feel that it's important for their estate to be in order before passing. 84% have 1 or more people whom they can confide in. 79% are optimistic about the future, and 76% say the age in which they retired is up to them. At the bottom, some more negative attitudes. Say 35% are anxious about their health. 20% feel they don't have enough control over the direction their life is saving. And only 47%, again, of this relatively affluent audience, feel that they're confident they will outlive their current savings. Or they are confident they'll outlive their current savings. So taking into account, all of these findings provide sort of a mixed bag. You have folks that feel optimistic about the future. They feel confident that they have people they can confide in, but when they think about their health and their current savings, they're far less confident in these measures. I should also mention these attributes were taken from Pew. Pew uses this research, I believe, these questions with respect to their retirement readiness survey. We took it for a couple of reasons. We wanted to ensure consistency in our data, so we use it as a data check. And also, behind the scenes, we're working on a segmentation of retirees. That's sort of the next step in our data, is to profile the retirees that we surveyed into meaningful segments. We have 1,000 of them, so it's a pretty robust base. And stay tuned for those findings in the months ahead for sure. By the way, those more likely to agree with the positive attributes on this slide are those who work with an FA, early savers, and those with a substantial amount of retirement savings. Plans for retirement, and the numbers on this slide reflect a net of those who have done and plan to do. I will say realistically, the have done percentage for the left-hand side in particular is probably lower than the numbers we cite here, but we did roll this up for the sake of simplicity in the report. You can see on the left the most common plans are creating a will or living trust at 92%, planning for unseen expenses that might happen in the future at 85%, as well as 85% mentioning discussing end-of-life wishes with their family. It was nice to see that 65% plan to or have already made significant travel plans to see the world. In the center of the slide, secondary plans include volunteering, making modifications or accommodations to their home, thinking about long-term care, I guess, and supporting their children. And then on the right, 14%, we thought this was interesting, have taken a part-time gig. Of those who've taken a part-time gig, it's usually just to keep the mind and body active. You saw on that previous slide about feelings and attitudes that that's really the most important attitude or the most common attitude that people agree with in this survey. So these findings are really in line with that. 35% of those who took a gig job took it for extra travel or fun money, and 23% did it to remain intellectually stimulated. Those more likely to do everything, the planners, not surprisingly, are those who work with a financial advisor, and those with substantial retirement savings at the time of retirement. Worries and concerns about retirement are profound and fall into two buckets. The top ones are health-related, staying healthy enough to enjoy retirement, not being able to care for myself and needing long-term care and healthcare costs. You can see the financial ones, and those are the ones in that orange color. Those are secondary. Having enough money to do what I want in retirement, taxes and outliving retirement savings. There are also, if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, concerns that become less worrisome with age, like healthcare costs and choosing between healthcare options, and concerns that become more worrisome with age, like long-term care needs. It's interesting that that becomes more worrisome with age because, as we'll see in the LTC slides that follow, there is a significant knowledge and awareness gap with respect to long-term care. Finally, at the bottom, 45% of retirees have what they self-report to be significant debt. Most commonly credit card debt, but 21% keep a mortgage and 17% have a car loan. You can look at this data in a couple of ways. I'm not personally convinced that having debt among this audience is a bad thing. It's often common among retirees who have some sort of income to maintain debt, to maintain a credit score, and for a number of reasons it's just more convenient to maintain some sort of debt. It's not clear that the debt that these retirees have impacts them negatively, as we'll see on the next slide. One of the reasons I say that is that if you look at the piggy bank icon here, the mean retirement savings at the time of retirement was $750,000. Median, of course, is lower. There's some skew, so the median's at $375,000. You can see that there are differences with respect to who has fewer versus greater savings. The earlier you start saving, the more money you have. Those who work with an advisor have more money. Men and Caucasians have more money. And those with higher income at the time of retirement tend to have more savings at the time of retirement. Attitudes toward this amount are relatively mixed. 24% feel they have less than what they need for retirement, whereas 39% feel they have more than what they need for retirement. In line with a quarter feeling they have less than what they need for retirement, you can see on the lower left here that about 4 in 10, 38% of retirees, say it's important to keep saving and growing their nest egg even though they've already retired. A few takeaways from this. I think first it is illustrative that when you've selected for those who've already retired and Most people say that the time that they retired is up to them, and you have $750,000 in average in retirement savings in the sample. It's illustrative that a quarter of them still feel they have less than what they need, and it's further illustrative that almost half think it's important to keep saving and growing their nest egg. This is all in line with that 47% agreement with confidence number. There's not a whole lot of confidence in the future right now, even among those particularly successful retirees. Spending in retirement. 41% are spending their retirement savings more slowly than expected. 48% are spending as expected, and 11% are spending their retirement savings faster than expected. On the right-hand side, you can see that 51% say their current expenses are lower than prior to retirement, whereas 16% say their current expenses are higher than prior to retirement. We did look at the data, and consistent with other folks' findings, those who are younger retirees or more recent retirees are more likely to be in that orange-colored bucket, in the sense that it's most common for those who most recently retired to spend more money on luxuries and travel and things of that nature, and that's probably what we're seeing here. Cool finding on the bottom right, 48% have no set strategy for spending their retirement savings. 36% take what they need when they need it. 12% just don't worry about it at all. Those are separate coded responses to that follow-up question. Taking that 48% into context, I think that the first thing we did was look at that 48% by amount of retirement savings, and we didn't really see a huge difference there. So our perspective is that those with no set strategy for spending sort of fall into two buckets. One of them is a bucket of those who know they have more money than they need, so they're not worrying about it too much. Second is probably those who are in the other side of the spectrum with respect to retirement savings, and they're just not as refined or diligent, I suppose, in their attitude or their approach towards spending. They probably never have in their entire career been that way, and it's something that carries over into retirement. Of course, that's sort of scary when you think about the fact that once you stop working, you're no longer making money. I mean, that's sort of a tautology, but it's one of those things that's just fundamentally true, and it's something that we know from our research that retirees worry about. So 48% at the end of the day have no set strategy for spending their retirement savings. Unless you have a lot of money, that's probably a problem with respect to your strategy. So that's it for our retirement findings. I should mention at this point that there's more data than we're sharing here. This is a really robust report. If anyone's interested in a deeper dive, feel free to reach out to me via email. I'll share my email address at the end of the presentation. We can talk through some ways to make that happen. This is all public release, and we're not charging for the data, so this is kind of where we're at with respect to that. Long-term care is our next section. Representative quote from our qualitative says, "I know I am rolling the dice not having long-term care insurance, but we have no family history of anyone needing that kind of care." There are a couple of quizzes interspersed throughout our findings. The first relates to long-term care. The results were abysmal, for lack of a better word. You can see that there are some multiple choice questions here. All this data comes from Morningstar as of 2020, and very few retirees got these questions all right, or even 4 or 5 right. You can see that 77% were incorrect with respect to the annual cost for a private room in a nursing home facility. It's $100,000, by the way. 56% were unable to determine the average annual cost of a home health aide to provide long-term care in your home. That's $50,000. And 63% could not get the average length of time that when someone needs long-term care, they need it. So that's 3.5 years for our knowledge. So when you think about the inevitability of some sort of long-term care need, and just frankly the life stage that retirees are in, it's not good that this gap exists. About 7 in 10, 69% of retirees are at least somewhat familiar with long-term care solutions. On the right-hand side, you can see that only 3 in 10, or 29%, own something. Take the specifics on the right-hand side with a grain of salt, because we know from conducting research in this space that there's not a whole lot of detailed awareness as to LTC. But you can see that 21% claim they own some sort of exclusive LTC policy. 7% claim they own a life LTC hybrid, and 2% own some other long-term care solution. The numbers aren't great with respect to what we'd hope people know, but you can see that those numbers are what they are. There's some population differences as well. Those who work with an advisor, those who are older than 65, and those who have retirement savings greater than $250,000 tend to be more likely to be familiar with as well as own a long-term care type product. So that's where we stand with respect to familiarity and ownership. After this, we were kind of curious to know what's keeping people from buying something like this. The top barriers are here on this slide. So you can see the top barriers to purchasing long-term care coverage include cost, the perceived cost, not being able to afford it, the plan to rely on self-insurance or some other type of insurance to fund this if needed, and the idea that annual premiums are not stable and keep going up. That being said, it's not that retirees can't think of a way that they might consider it. You can see on the right we've listed a few of the top benefits that influenced or would purchase some sort of LTC product. Providing peace of mind, not becoming a burden to spouse or children, avoid depleting my assets to pay for care, and ensuring I can get the care I needed when I needed it are the top 4 benefits that retirees can think of that might help influence their decision to purchase something related to LTC. So they're out there. Obviously there are solutions that exist either as riders or occasionally as standalone products, and it's helpful to sort of communicate those benefits, I think, to retirees to make this more top of mind for them, because it is often a need later in life. We have a whole separate version of this presentation with respect to health insurance and Medicare findings. I'm just going to provide a quick snapshot of Medicare here, knowing that this is sort of a different audience. Representative quote here is that I was not knowledgeable about my Medicare options before becoming eligible. I am more eligible now, but I am by no means good at it. We offered a Medicare quiz. We're showing the findings among the youngest retirees here. So these are all retirees under age 65. The results here were actually a bit more encouraging, with an incorrect rate of under 18% or less for each of the 5 questions. The results on the right were less positive. So there are 4 parts to Medicare that can be purchased, and because not everyone purchases every part, this sort of conceptual knowledge was much lower with respect to the early retirees in this research. Again, those who are not yet eligible for Medicare. If I think about findings for insurance, group benefits companies that provide other financial services, I think about retirement readiness, and I think about the idea that those who are, let's say, between the ages of 50 and 64 who are full-time employed have significant concerns and anxiety about the act of retiring. And even though you may not offer health insurance, you're still offering related solutions. And I think that there's an opportunity while folks are employed still, or while they're pre-retirees, depending upon your area of focus, to identify these concerns and these areas of gaps of knowledge to help pre-retirees understand what they need to know. This data on health insurance status here is presented in total, regardless of age. 80% of those in our survey are on Medicare. The remainder, who tend to be younger, are on an employer-sponsored plan, a plan in the individual market, or something else. You can see that there are different types of Medicare plans, and the most commonly purchased type of plan is Medicare Advantage, followed by Original Medicare plus Medigap, and then finally 15% on Original Medicare only. Takeaway for the audience in this presentation is that the average age to start exploring Medicare options is 64. You all probably know that you become eligible for Medicare at 65. So the takeaway here is that people don't really research things, with some exceptions. People usually wait until the last second, and this is again an opportunity for insurance and financial services companies to offer a little bit more detail as to what's coming down the pike for pre-retirees and those in that age range. Health insurance shopping behavior. The top primary source of info about Medicare is Medicare.gov. They also often use health insurance companies' websites, broker or agent, or cms.gov. Interestingly, we do a lot of research in this space, in the healthcare and health insurance space, and there are a lot of complaints about the governmental websites. So the top resources are not generally loved by retirees and early retirees. So there's an opportunity there for companies in this space to help improve the user experience from a digital perspective and from a knowledge gathering perspective as well. On the right, we see a finding that we see really all the time in this space, but there's some stability in terms of whether retirees shop for Medicare during open enrollment. 86% kept the same health insurance company and same plan. 89% are not likely to switch health insurance plans during the next open enrollment, so they'll stay put. And if you look at that donut chart in the middle, over half, 54%, did not even research or shop anything else. That's how happy they are or stable they are with their current insurance provider. And then finally, one more slide in this section, feelings about health insurance and Medicare. You can see there's a trend, and these are top 3 box ratings again, but there's a trend where the older you are, the more confident you are, and the more well-equipped you feel with respect to health insurance and Medicare. That being said, even those age 65 or older are not at super high levels with respect to a few of these attributes here, namely understanding the difference between different types of Medicare coverage or different Medicare plans, and 76% saying it's easy to transition from previous insurance to Medicare. You can also see at the very bottom that 42% of those 65 and older are concerned about the cost they need to pay, and 45% of those who are not yet eligible are concerned about the costs they will have to pay moving forward. So key takeaway on this slide is that there's an opportunity for all types of insurance companies to use this data to make folks feel more confident, more well-equipped about the future with respect to their health insurance choices. And there might be opportunities to help them with respect to their employer-sponsored plans as well. In 2019, Zeldis conducted some thought leadership into the area of healthcare consumerism. We're not showing everything from this study here, but we did see an opportunity to refresh a few of our findings from the 2019 research with a particular focus on the retiree population. A representative quote about telemedicine is from a retiree who says, "I love it. It works. It's on time. You don't have to sit in the waiting room forever." We went into this research not quite sure what we'd expect from retirees, but what we found was that 37% of retirees have already done some sort of telemedicine. Looking at the left-hand side of the slide, of those 37%, almost all of them, 92%, used it for the first time after the pandemic started. Additionally, 92% scheduled a visit with a provider they already had a relationship with. Going deeper into that 37% in blue there on the left, you can see the types of providers they see are most commonly a primary care physician, although specialists, nurses, and behavioral health providers are used with some regularity as well. Most of the time, telemedicine is a video chat, although 47% of the time it's a phone-only chat. And doing the math, 88% were at least somewhat satisfied with the telemedicine experience. So some takeaways from that. Retirees often get, I think, an unfair bad rap for not being technologically savvy. But you can see that most of them are quite able to conduct what I would argue is a fairly sophisticated tech process. We know from our previous research into healthcare consumerism and telemedicine that there's still not a perfect platform for it. The current solutions aren't universally liked for a number of reasons that I won't really belabor, but it's interesting that these retirees, for the most part, really appreciated the experience. Most retirees, almost all retirees, in fact, have at least heard of telemedicine. 95% have if you roll up the blue and orange bars on the right. And you can see there's some, I would argue, minimal, but some incidents of integrating information from one's Fitbit, Apple Watch, or app in their conversations with physicians. So healthcare consumerism is changing, and we saw a lot in the working population back in 2019 with respect to healthcare consumerism, and we're seeing this sort of move over into the retiree population as well here in 2021, which we felt was quite interesting. Our last few slides pertain to COVID. We wanted to talk a little bit about the pandemic. Here I'll just say a quick reminder. This data was collected back in May, back before anyone was really thinking too much about the Delta variant. So keep that in mind as we talk through these findings. Kind of a sad representative quote here. COVID hit and I spent the last year home by myself. Obviously almost everyone experienced some degree of isolation as a result of the COVID pandemic, and retirees, for a number of reasons, may have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic itself. To that end, 37% of retirees report that COVID negatively impacted their mental health, 20% report a negative impact on their physical health, and 18% of retirees report COVID negatively impacted their financial security. It's interesting in the lower right that those younger retirees, those under age 65, are more likely than those 65 or older to say that COVID took a toll on their mental, physical, and financial health. Our hypothesis about that is that there were expectations for those folks to do a lot more during 2020 and 2021, maybe travel, visiting relatives, playing a lot of golf or whatever, tennis. I think there's just a lot there. And it makes sense, I think, that those younger retirees were more likely to say that there was a negative impact due to the pandemic. Interesting findings on the right with respect to what we know now about the Delta variant. 32% back in May felt the pandemic would end within the next 6 months. 40% of retirees believe the pandemic will end in the next 12 months. That would be May of next year. But 28% of retirees believe it will take years for the pandemic to end. COVID vaccination status. Looking at the New York Times most recent vaccination data and focusing on those 65 or older, keep in mind that this data is from this research is those 55 or older. As of today, I believe that something like 85% of those 65 or older have been fully vaccinated and 92% have been partially vaccinated. I can be wrong about those numbers, but that's what I recall from the last time I saw them. But in our research, 88% back in May were already at least partially vaccinated, if not fully vaccinated against COVID, with 2% planning to do so as soon as possible and 2% not yet, but plan to do so at some point. Only 6% are not getting vaccinated and 2% were unsure. Among those who got vaccinated, I think the reasons are pretty straightforward. The vaccinated folks in our survey want to feel safe, want to benefit the community, seek to avoid getting COVID or getting sick in some way, or have an underlying health condition. Among the small percentage of those who are not getting vaccinated, you can see their reasons for not doing so include being concerned about the effects or not trusting the vaccine. So interesting findings here, I think, just in total with respect to COVID. And that's pretty much all we have. We like to end these a little bit early, but I'm happy to stay as long as you'd like to hear any questions or answers with respect and provide answers with respect to the questions that folks have. Thank you so much for your time.